Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family member? No names, just yes or no.
Thanksgiving always had this weird energy in our family, like someone was holding their breath the whole time, and you didn't know who it was until dessert. My mother, Diane, insisted on hosting every single year, even when her knees got bad, and my dad, Carl, forgot to take the turkey out of the freezer on time, even when my brother Mark had his third kid and offered to have it at his place, just this once. She refused every offer, always with a forced smile and the line, "It's tradition. We keep tradition." And maybe it was. But it was also a performance, a stage where everyone played their part, and I, Rachel, was always cast as the stagehand in the wings, never the lead, never even an extra with lines. This year was no different. I'd arrived 2 hours early to help prep. I chopped vegetables in silence while Mom criticized the cut of my jeans. I basted the turkey while Dad sat in the recliner pretending to look busy by fiddling with the remote. I set the table, poured the wine, and even took a last-minute phone call from my brother's wife to reassure her that yes, their daughter's nut allergy had been accounted for, even though I hadn't cooked the green beans and had to run out to buy new ones just in case. I'd done everything short of stitching the damn tablecloth myself. But when dinner started, when everyone had their plates and the room finally quieted under the clink of silverware and the hush of holiday tension, that's when my mother decided to give her little speech. She stood up, God bless her knees. She always made a show of rising slow like she was 80, not 65, and raised her glass with a soft, quivering smile like she was about to announce someone's engagement. Her voice had that sing-song quality she used whenever she wanted to seem warm, but was really about to drive a knife into someone, very gently. "I just want to say," she began, pausing to put her hand on Mark's shoulder, "how truly blessed your father, and I feel to have a son like Mark. You've always been our rock. Even when things got hard, you held the family together. You built such a beautiful life for yourself, and we couldn't be prouder." There was a pause. A stillness that sucked the air out of the room. Everyone turned to look at Mark, who gave this humble little shrug like he hadn't been praised his entire life for doing the bare minimum. He smiled like he'd just won an award he hadn't applied for. His wife beamed. Their oldest son gave him a high five. My mother sat back down with this satisfied little sigh, and just like that, dinner continued. Not one word about me. I didn't expect a speech. But not even a casual, offhand, and "thank you to Rachel for helping today." I stared at my plate, then slowly started collecting the empty dishes. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just got up, went to the kitchen, and started rinsing plates while everyone else was laughing at something Mark had said about refinancing his house. I don't know if anyone noticed I was gone. I doubt they did. It's a strange thing, the moment you realize your family doesn't actually see you. I don't mean metaphorically, I mean they genuinely look past you. They know your face, but not your weight. They see your name in group chats, but not your name in the will. They remember your birthday only when Facebook reminds them, and even then, they might just hit the like button and move on. After the pie was served and most of the family had dispersed into the living room to nap or gossip or sip cider while watching old reruns of Wheel of Fortune, I stayed behind and finished clearing the table. My niece, bless her heart, offered to help, but her mom called her away, saying something about needing to brush her hair before photos. So I was alone. Again. Washing dishes that I hadn't even eaten off of because I barely touched my food. My appetite had left around the time my mom had called Mark her rock. That's when I heard it. My dad in the hallway, talking to my mom in the bedroom, his voice low and scratchy like he didn't want me to hear, but of course I did. "Why didn't you say anything about Rachel? She helped more than anyone." And my mom, calm, cold, composed, just said, "She knows." Like that was enough. Like acknowledgement wasn't something people needed, just something they got if they were lucky. Like I was supposed to be grateful to be included at all. It hit me harder than anything else that day. Not the speech, not the silence after. That one line. "She knows." As if saying it out loud would have cost her something. After everyone left and the house got quiet, I went in my car, sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the steering wheel, and just stared ahead at the falling leaves. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even swear. I just felt this clarity. Like something had finally clicked into place. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just done. Done pretending that I wasn't hurt. Done playing the part they wrote for me. And then, just as I was about to start the engine, my phone buzzed. A message from Mark. Mom locked herself in her room. What did you say? I read it twice. That's when I smiled. Just a little. Because I hadn't said anything. I didn't have to. But clearly, something I didn't say had hit harder than anything I ever could have. So I typed back. Only the truth. And I drove home in silence, headlights cutting through the fog, already planning the next move in my mind. Because if no one was going to tell my story, then I was going to make damn sure they felt it. There's something uniquely cruel about the kind of love that comes with conditions, a quiet sort of cruelty that doesn't scream or slam doors, but rather lives in the pauses between praise. The way a compliment gets handed to one child like an heirloom while the other just holds the family camera and takes the picture. And growing up in our house, that imbalance didn't feel like a tragedy, not at first. It felt more like background noise, like the hum of the fridge, or the way the porch light flickered but never got fixed. You notice it, but you live around it. You build a life by stepping over what's missing. After Thanksgiving night, I couldn't stop hearing that hum. Every memory I pulled out felt warped by it. There I was, 9 years old, watching Mark open a brand new bike for his birthday, a sleek red Schwinn with his name in decals, while I got a pair of clearance ballet shoes 2 sizes too big because girls grow fast. There I was at 14, grounded for missing curfew even though I'd only stayed late to pick up Mark from a party where he'd thrown up in the bushes. There I was at 21, dropping out of college for a semester to move home and help Dad after his first heart scare, while Mark couldn't take off work, even though I knew for a fact he'd just gone on a fishing trip in Montana that week. The pattern wasn't new. I'd just spent years pretending it wasn't a pattern at all. But now I saw it for what it was, a ledger. A silent, unspoken tally of who mattered more. And it wasn't that Mark was a bad person. He wasn't cruel. He didn't rub it in my face. He just accepted the role he'd been handed, played it well, and never once thought to look behind the curtain to see what it cost the rest of us. Or more specifically, what it cost me. The Saturday after Thanksgiving, what my family called Leftovers Day, where everyone came back for sandwiches and pie and to pat themselves on the back for surviving the holiday without a screaming match, I showed up exactly on time, not a minute early. I brought a store-bought cheesecake and nothing else, and when my mom opened the door, she did that tight-lipped smile that meant she'd noticed. Good. I wanted her to notice. I'd spent the night before digging through old storage bins in my attic, not because I was nostalgic, but because I was hunting. Somewhere among the water-stained Christmas cards and tangled string lights, I found it, a picture I'd taken during Mom's first chemo treatment. She was sitting in that awful beige hospital chair, pale as bone but trying to smile, and I was holding her hand with both of mine, leaning close, my eyes swollen from crying all morning. Mark wasn't there. Mark didn't come to a single treatment. He sent flowers once. He said the smell of hospitals made him dizzy. I printed the photo at the drugstore, found a decent black frame, and wrote a note in clean, simple handwriting. He never came. But I was there. I wrapped it. Neatly. Tastefully. No passive aggression, no glitter bombs, no sarcasm. Just truth, packaged like a gift. I left it on the console table in the foyer when I walked in, beneath the usual pile of mail and catalogs. Then I went to the kitchen, made a small plate, and sat on the back porch with my coat zipped up, sipping lukewarm cider while I watched my dad and Mark play catch with the grandkids like they were the stars of some Hallmark ad. No one said anything about the photo during dinner. I waited. I watched my mom glance at it once, then turn away. I watched her pretend it wasn't there. That was fine. I hadn't expected a scene. I'd expected silence. And she delivered it, as always, with the precision of a woman who could ruin you without ever raising her voice. On Sunday, I came by to pick up a serving dish I'd left behind, an excuse, really, to see if the photo was still there. It wasn't. Not on the console. Not in the living room. Not in the trash. Instead, in its place, hanging on the family photo wall above the upright piano, was an old framed picture of Mark and Mom. She's laughing, he's hugging her from behind, and I'm nowhere in the frame. That picture hadn't been there before. She'd taken mine down and put that one up. A replacement. A statement. I stood there in the hallway for a full minute, just breathing. Just taking it in. The picture wasn't new. It had been around for years. She'd chosen it. She'd made a choice. That's when I realized something sharp and ugly and oddly freeing. She didn't just overlook me. She actively chose not to see me. Not in public. Not in private. Not even in memory. The ledger wasn't invisible anymore. It was carved into the walls of that house, gilded and polished and framed. And still, I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I didn't throw anything. Instead, I walked back to the kitchen, found the serving dish, washed it myself, and thanked my father on the way out. He looked confused, like he didn't know what I was thanking him for. I didn't tell him. I let him sit in that soft, dumb fog where men like him float when their wives run the show and their daughters go quiet. Driving home, I kept the radio off and thought about what came next. Not revenge in the dramatic sense, no tantrums, no grand betrayals, but a quieter kind. A slow unraveling. I wasn't going to destroy my mother's image of her perfect son. I was just going to ask the questions that pulled at the threads. I was going to let her do the destroying herself. I smiled once, briefly, at a red light. If she wanted to act like that photo never existed, I'd give her something she couldn't take down. Something permanent. And it was already in motion. The Saturday after Thanksgiving passed like a fog rolling in across a lake, silent, heavy, and dense with the kind of unspoken tension that only families can truly manufacture without a single raised voice. And once the fog settled in, it didn't matter whether anyone admitted it was there or not, because the temperature had already dropped, the air had changed, and everyone was colder than before. I spent that weekend moving with a kind of mechanical calm, folding laundry I didn't need to fold, scrubbing countertops already clean, walking from room to room in my house like I might find something I hadn't seen before. Something forgotten that might explain what I'd been doing with the last 2 decades of my life, trying to be indispensable to people who treated my presence as if it were some mildly pleasant background noise. It was the following Wednesday when I found the document, not because I was looking for it, not really, but because life has a cruel way of handing you confirmation when you're just beginning to doubt your own instincts. My father had called me that morning to ask if I could help him sort through some of the old paperwork in the upstairs office. He said he couldn't find the tax forms from last year and swore my mother had reorganized everything after the remodel, which sounded believable enough, since she treated paper clutter like it carried disease. I told him I'd swing by after work, more out of habit than willingness. And, honestly, I was curious. Not hopeful, not suspicious, just curious, the way a person slows down when passing the scene of a crash they didn't cause, but feel responsible for anyway. I arrived around 6. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and candle wax, and the fireplace was lit, not for warmth, but for aesthetic, my mother's usual preference. She was out at a church group meeting, or so Dad said, and he waved vaguely toward the upstairs office with the absent-minded energy of someone who just wanted the problem to resolve itself. I climbed the stairs slowly, noting how every photo on the hallway wall now seemed to lean slightly more in Mark's direction, like even the frames had picked a favorite. Once inside the office, I opened the metal filing cabinet she kept locked with one of those tiny silver keys that felt designed to make you feel like you were intruding, even when you weren't. But my father had left it unlocked, and that alone felt like permission. The file folders were labeled in her tidy, precise handwriting, blue ink, all caps, slightly slanted to the right. Insurance. Utilities. Medical. Mortgage. I flipped through them like I was skimming a stranger's diary, and then I saw it. Estate planning. Nothing dramatic, no red tape or seals or fireproof envelopes. Just a manila folder, slightly worn at the edges. I opened it on the desk and found the draft of their will, dated about 5 years back, stapled neatly and signed in long, confident pen strokes. My name was there. Technically. in the way someone might remember to add salt after the meal's already been cooked. It said I was to inherit my mother's car, a silver sedan she'd driven into the ground years ago, the same one I had totaled after hydroplaning on the freeway when I was 21. They'd never replaced it, never even offered. Mark, on the other hand, was to receive the house, the remaining savings, and all personal property of sentimental and practical value. I read that line 3 times, not because I was surprised, but because something about the wording made my chest tighten. Of sentimental and practical value. As if I belonged to neither category. As if my presence in their life had been helpful but ultimately replaceable. I didn't take the will. I didn't confront my father. I didn't cry. I just stood there, slowly, deliberately took out my phone and snapped a single photo of the page. No flash. No sound. Just proof. Proof that everything I'd ever suspected wasn't a result of overthinking or bitterness or the chip on my shoulder they loved to point at like it was my defining trait. It was real. Documented. Signed. That Saturday, I made sure I attended Leftovers Night, our second round of forced gratitude, the tradition where the extended family gathered again, convinced that repeating a mediocre meal meant they were close-knit and loving. I showed up with the same store-bought cheesecake and a new bottle of red wine and a plan. Dinner was as dull as ever. Everyone laughed at the same stories, complimented the turkey even though it was drier than dust, and made offhand comments about how lucky Mom and Dad were to have children like us. When someone mentioned how well Mark was doing at work, how steady and reliable he had always been, I raised my glass slowly, deliberately, and let the silence build before I spoke. To Mark, I said, letting my voice carry just enough to reach the corners of the room. Who, according to the will I found upstairs, will be getting everything in the end, including the house I helped renovate and the savings I watched Mom hoard like dragon gold. Cheers. The room froze. My Aunt Cheryl blinked. My cousin Steve coughed into his wine. My dad looked like he might choke on his green beans. Mark? He smiled. That infuriating, tight-lipped smile of a man who thinks charm is a shield. But his eyes flicked toward mine like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't entirely sure how much I'd seen. I took a sip of wine, sat down, and continued eating as if nothing had happened, as if the bomb I'd dropped had simply become part of the decor. No one said a word. No one challenged me. And that silence tasted better than anything on my plate. Later that night, while pretending to help clear dishes I hadn't dirted, I caught a sliver of conversation in the hallway. My father whispering to my mother, who had apparently returned early from her Bible group. She found the will, he murmured. I told you we should have updated it. To which my mother replied, in that same even tone she used for scolding misbehaving grandchildren, she always finds what she's not supposed to. She's like a bloodhound. And I thought, standing there, watching them pretend I wasn't 10 feet away, that maybe being a bloodhound wasn't such a bad thing. At least bloodhounds aren't fooled by perfume or appearances. At least they follow the truth, no matter how buried. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just wiped my hands on a towel, picked up my purse, and kissed my niece on the forehead before I left. She was playing on her iPad, completely unaware of the battlefield she'd been born into. But I was aware. And I was just getting started. There comes a point in every long, drawn-out war where both sides stop pretending they don't know what they're fighting for, where the masks fall just enough to show the edges of the teeth beneath the smile, and while Thanksgiving had been the opening shot and Leftovers Night, the warning flare, I knew the next step had to be more direct, more surgical, not because I needed more drama, but because I wanted clarity, a kind of emotional confession extracted not through yelling or blame, but through exposure, through carefully removing every layer Mark had used to insulate himself from the mess he helped create. And so, I asked him to lunch. It wasn't hard to set up. Mark, ever the cordial older brother, ever the polished family man who believed in keeping the peace so long as he didn't have to give up control, agreed immediately, as if my gesture was some kind of white flag. He didn't understand, not yet, that I wasn't surrendering. I was baiting the hook. We met at a mid-tier bistro in town, the kind of place with overpriced salads and reclaimed wood furniture and servers who call you friend, while subtly rushing you out after 90 minutes. Mark wore his usual weekend uniform, dark jeans, casual button-down, watch glinting under the sunlight as though time itself owed him something. I wore black. Not because I was in mourning, but because black absorbs heat and I wanted to burn. We talked for 10 minutes about nothing. Work. The weather. His kids. How Mom seemed tired lately. I nodded, I smiled, I listened the way women are trained to, attentively, strategically, waiting for the opening. And then, as our drinks arrived and the moment had ripened just enough to feel almost casual, I leaned in, kept my tone even, and said, "Do you remember the lake house?" Mark blinked, a pause barely longer than natural, but enough for me to know he did. "Which trip?" "You know which one," I said, and there was no humor in my voice, no nostalgia, just gravity. He took a slow sip of water, eyes flicking to the window beside us, as if looking for an escape route, then back to me. "That was a long time ago. That doesn't make it untrue." He set the glass down a little too carefully. "Why are you bringing this up now?" I didn't answer right away. I let silence bloom between us, heavy and uncomfortable, the way you let a wound air out before stitching it shut. Then I said, "Because Mom still thinks I broke that window. And because I took the blame. And because you let me." Mark's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching near his temple. I was 16. We were both kids. And yet, I replied, only one of us paid for it. I got grounded for a month. I missed homecoming. And I never told anyone that you'd had your friends over, that you snuck them in while Mom and Dad were at the hospital with Grandpa, that you were drunk and dared Kevin to throw that rock through the back window. You were the golden boy. I was convenient. His voice dropped. "Why does this matter now?" "Because it never stopped mattering," I said, and I could feel the emotion rising in my chest. Not tears, not rage, but something colder, sharper, like the relief of setting down a weight you'd forgotten you were carrying. "You've always been able to walk away clean. And I've always been the one sweeping up after you." Mark leaned back, exhaled through his nose. "If I admitted it, if I said it now, what would that even do?" I shrugged. "Nothing. Everything. Maybe I just want to hear you say it." He looked down at his plate, untouched, his fork motionless beside a salad he had no appetite for. And then, with the smallest nod, he said, "You're right. I let you take the fall. I let you do a lot of things. I didn't think it would follow you. I didn't think you cared that much." That last line landed with a strange thud in my chest, not because it shocked me, but because it was so perfectly in character. Mark never did understand that people remember what they aren't allowed to forget. That memory isn't always about trauma. Sometimes it's about imbalance, about knowing your sacrifices were never acknowledged because the narrative didn't allow for your complexity. I nodded once, as if sealing something invisible between us. "Thanks for saying it." "Are you planning to tell them?" he asked, not angry, not afraid, just resigned. I leaned in slightly, smiled, not cruelly, but with the kind of calm that comes from holding all the cards, and said, "I don't have to. You just did." That night, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the voice memo I had recorded on my phone, tucked carefully in my jacket pocket during lunch. It wasn't illegal. Not in our state, and even if it had been, I didn't intend to use it in court. I had no interest in lawsuits or legal drama. I just wanted the truth on record. And with a little editing, just trimming my own voice out of the frame, it became something potent. A confession, full of pauses, hesitant truths, and just enough detail to shake the tree. At 9 p.m., I uploaded the audio to the family group chat, a sacred digital space once reserved for birthday wishes, forwarded memes, and holiday plans. No warning, no explanation, just a 1-minute clip titled Mark.mp3. Then I turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke up to 5 missed calls, 3 from my mother, 2 from Mark. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't read the texts. I made myself breakfast like any other Saturday, brewed my coffee, opened the windows, and let the air move through the house. By noon, my father called. This time, I picked up. His voice was quiet, The way it gets when he's confused, when the ground beneath him has shifted and he's not sure which direction he's supposed to fall. Rachel, why would you do that? I said nothing. I let the question hang. Finally, I answered, because I've spent my entire life cleaning up after someone who never got dirt on his hands. And I'm tired. There was silence. And then, more softly, your mother's upset. She always is, I replied, then hung up gently, not rudely, not angrily, just finally. I didn't need revenge in the way people imagined it, in fire or confrontation or public spectacle. I needed a shift. A tilt. A moment where the golden boy stood in the shadow and realized that the light had a cost. And the cost, this time, wasn't mine. By the time Sunday rolled around, the final lap of the Thanksgiving weekend, that hollow echo of a day meant for digesting both food and family dysfunction. What little was left of the performative politeness in our family had already begun to rot beneath the surface, and though no one had called an official ceasefire, the collective silence following my audio message the night before said more than any confrontation ever could. There were no group texts about brunch. No photos of leftover pie. No half-hearted memes about turkey-induced comas. Only the heavy, deliberate stillness of people who had seen a new version of the truth and couldn't decide if they wanted to argue with it or quietly pretend it didn't change everything. I had not heard from Mark directly since the calls I ignored that morning, but I had heard from his wife, Dana, who sent me a single, blisteringly cold message at 2:30 a.m. that read, "You had no right." I didn't reply. What would I even say? That she was correct, technically, but morally, perhaps not? That I had waited 20 years for someone else to tell the truth and had only acted when it became clear no one else ever would? That I hadn't done it to hurt anyone, but because I wanted the quiet ache in my chest to finally have a voice? None of that would satisfy her. None of it would bring her peace. And frankly, I wasn't sure I owed her that. Instead, I did what I always did. I cleaned. I swept my kitchen floor. I folded blankets that didn't need folding. I took the trash out an hour before pickup, just to feel like something was moving in the right direction. And then I sat on my back porch, wrapped in a throw, coffee lukewarm in hand, watching the neighbors rake their yards, their normalcy floating across the hedges like taunts from a life I'd never really had. Around noon, I got the call I hadn't expected to come. My mother. Her voice on the other end was low, as if she were speaking from a room she didn't want anyone else to overhear. There was no rage in it, which almost made it worse. Just that particular blend of disappointment and tightly wound control she had perfected over decades of making people feel wrong even when they were right. "I think we should talk," she said, not asking. "Then talk," I replied, and I heard the small inhale she always made when I defied her expectation of a daughter who would fold neatly back into place. "I don't understand what you're trying to prove," she said, and I pictured her in the kitchen, still in her Sunday sweater, eyes fixed on the same window she stared out of every morning, the one facing the dead oak tree in the yard, as if staring at something that refused to grow made her feel more rooted. "I'm not proving anything," I said quietly. "I'm exposing it." "You embarrassed your brother," she said, and I could practically hear her squinting through the phone, as if that were the worst crime imaginable. "No," I replied, "he embarrassed himself. I just gave everyone a chance to listen." There was a pause, not long, but long enough for me to know she was recalculating, like a machine fed the wrong answer and struggling to realign. Then she asked, with the soft, surgical cruelty she'd always reserved for me, "What do you want, Rachel?" It was the question. The question buried under every unspoken slight, under every empty birthday card signed with only initials, under every moment she had lifted Mark's name with joy and spoken mine only with obligation. And I surprised even myself when I said, with more calm than I expected, recognition. She didn't respond. Not at first. Because she didn't know what that meant, not really. Not for me. "I don't want apologies," I continued. "I don't want the house, or the money, or another dinner where everyone pretends I didn't spend years holding this family together while Mark played the hero from a safe distance. I want anyone, to say, 'Rachel, you mattered too.' That's it." Another pause. Another silence. And then, with that perfectly even tone she used when wanting to end a conversation without actually hanging up, she said, "I'll talk to your father." And just like that, the line went dead. That evening, the sky turned a dull, heavy gray, and I sat on the living room floor with an old box of home movies, tapes I hadn't watched in years, dusty plastic cases labeled in fading Sharpie. I found one marked Thanksgiving, '98, and I played it, partly out of morbid curiosity, partly because I needed to remember whether I was ever actually there. The screen flickered, grainy and orange-hued, and there we were. My parents smiling stiffly for the camera. Mark carving the turkey. My mom laughing. My dad holding a wine glass. And me blurry in the background, wearing a wrinkled sweater, setting the table, arranging the napkins, stepping aside so someone else could shine. No one said my name. No one thanked me. I paused the video, stared at that frame, me, half cut off, eyes down, hands full. And something in me clicked. Not a revelation. Not even rage. Just a decision. I deleted the video. That night, as I was brushing my teeth, phone face down on the counter beside me, it buzzed once. A text. From Mark. "You win. Congrats. You happy now?" I stared at it for a long time, letting the water run in the sink, the mirror fogging, my reflection blurred. I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that one too. There were too many truths I could throw back at him, too many memories I could stack like bricks until the guilt walled him in for good. But none of that would change what had already happened. None of that would make me happy. Not really. So I sent only one word. No. And I meant it. Because I didn't feel joy or triumph or even peace. What I felt was the thud of something finally landing, after all the years of floating just beneath the surface, after all the swallowed words and buried resentment. The truth had hit the ground. Not as a weapon. Not as a gift. Just as fact. You ever get exactly what you wanted and realize it was never what you needed? That's what they never tell you about speaking your truth. It doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just confirms you were always alone in the room. Sometimes it just opens a window, and all you can do is watch the cold come in. I turned off the lights, walked to bed, and lay there in the dark, not angry, not relieved, just still. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself to anyone. I hadn't destroyed the family. I just finally stopped pretending it wasn't already broken.